Hey guys, tonight we slip softly into the whispering winds of the Sahara, where stars scatter like spilled salt across an endless night sky. You find yourself in the hush of desert twilight, the horizon still burning with the last embers of sun, as cool air replaces the day's fierce blaze. The sand beneath your feet still holds warmth, radiating through the thin soles of your sandals, while ahead the silhouettes of camels sway rhythmically, each step pressing an ancient path into the dunes. The caravan's bells tinkle faintly, almost like wind chimes, guiding you deeper into this story that has been walked for 1,000 years. So take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from, so tell me your location and the local time in the comments below. The desert night stretches open and you begin to follow the line of traders moving across the dunes. Each carries not only goods but fragments of memory, sacks of salt like small gleaming rocks, ivory tusks wrapped in hides, and rolled cloth dyed deep indigo. The story of the Kanem-Bornu Empire begins here, not with palaces or battles, but with the rhythm of human footsteps and the whisper of trade drifting across vast emptiness. You walk in silence, the sound of sand crunching beneath your feet, soft as breath. The empire is still only a whisper in this age, the land called Kanem, scattered with small clans and chiefs, nomadic and uncertain, bending like reeds to desert storms. Yet in the shifting of caravans, something greater is already stirring. Historians still argue whether the roots of Kanem trace back to Saharan Berber influences or to more southerly pastoral peoples who pressed northward in search of water and grazing land. You picture both stories like parallel paths in the sand merging and dividing as winds move them. A lone drumbeat echoes from somewhere in the distance, perhaps a caravan guard keeping rhythm to ward off the drowsiness of night. The desert has always been more than silence, it hums with unseen life. As you tilt your head back, the sky reveals its thick quilt of stars, guiding points for traders who have learned to read them like lines of poetry. You imagine yourself gliding forward in that endless sea, led by the shimmer of constellations that have been mapped onto myths for centuries. Some whisper that desert spirits live among the dunes' guardians who can lead travelers to water or swallow them whole in a storm. Your steps fall into sync with the camels. Their padded feet press softly into the sand, leaving little trace behind. You feel the patience of this land. It cycles too long for human eyes, yet every grain of sand feels ancient. As dawn approaches, the horizon slowly blurs into a pale line, the first hints of sun painting the dunes in rose and gold. The traders begin to stir with purpose, their movements sharper now, tightening ropes, balancing packs, preparing for the long heat ahead. The Kanem that will one day command an empire begins here, among these early desert routes, where salt is worth its weight in life itself. Each block of salt carried northward could be traded in southern markets for gold or slaves, a grim yet powerful exchange that shaped centuries. You breathe in the dry air, the scent of dust and camel musk, the faint sweetness of dried dates that merchants chew for strength. Yet beneath these practical exchanges lies something almost mystical. Traders believe that wells along the way are blessed, that certain oases appear only to the worthy. They murmur prayers as they draw water, thanking unseen hands that allow life in this barren place. For you, stepping into their world, it feels like standing on the thin veil between harsh survival and divine providence. As the sun rises higher, shadows shorten. You taste grit on your tongue, and your lips grow dry even though you've only imagined this march. You pause to adjust the cloth, shielding your head just as a caravan guard would, tightening the folds against the glare. Your eyes ache from brightness, and you feel the humbling vastness all around a place where a single human step feels both fragile and eternal. The dawn crossing is more than movement. It is a statement of will, a quiet defiance against a land that seeks to erase you. This is where empire begins, not yet in crowns or laws, but in the shared rhythm of those who carry salt ivory and stories across the sea of sand. And as you walk, you know the story is only opening each step, carrying you deeper into Kanem's becoming. The sun climbs higher, its fire pooling across the dunes like molten brass. You squint against the glare, the horizon shivering in waves of heat. Somewhere ahead, a smear of green interrupts the gold, a promise of water of shade. You trudge with the caravan toward it, and slowly the shape clarifies an oasis fringed with palm trees, the leaves swaying in a desert breeze that feels almost miraculous after the stillness of open sand. The early life of Kanem is scattered here, around such hidden wells. You crouch beside the water's edge, cupping cool liquid into your hands, and taste the faint mineral tang of survival. For centuries, tribes of nomads roamed these lands, tethered to the oases like beads on a fragile string. Some were Saharan pastoral people guiding their herds of cattle, sheep, and camels between pastures. Others came from further north, carrying stories of Berber bloodlines. The desert was both barrier and bridge, pushing people apart and then binding them together whenever they found the same life-giving pool. The camps that sprouted near these oases were temporary, yet every night fires flickered and voices rose in songs about ancestors who had walked the sands before. You hear those voices now, low and rhythmic, carrying into the night. Some whisper of spirits that guard the wells, unseen figures who punish those who take water without respect. It is said that certain wells will run dry if approached with arrogance, leaving only sand where life once shimmered. You sit near the traders as they share dates and flatbread, breaking food with quiet ritual. Around you, men speak of chiefs who rise and fall, their power as fragile as the shifting dunes. Historians still argue whether the earliest rulers of Kanem were merely tribal elders, or if already by the 9th century dynastic claims were beginning to form. In this uncertainty lies the charm of Kanem's dawn, a kingdom that might have been no more than whispers, already dreaming of permanence. As evening comes, the desert cools and the air feels almost tender against your skin. The nomads lead their flocks to graze on tufts of grass around the oasis, animals crunching softly in the twilight. You watch shadows stretch long across the sand, and above the stars bloom again, each a guidepost in the endless sea of night. You imagine how fragile life must have felt, how every oasis was a contested prize. A well could mean the difference between flourishing or famine, and so diplomacy and conflict alike often centered on these pools. You hear a murmur of an old tale, two tribes clashing under moonlight, both claiming the same spring. Neither prevailed, and when dawn broke, the water had vanished, swallowed by the desert itself. Whether truth or legend, the story lingers like heat long after the fire fades. You stretch out on the sand belly, full from the shared meal, and listen to the crackle of embers. The night is cool, but the warmth of fire licks against your skin. The men around you speak of journeys still ahead, salt for gold, cattle for cloth, and sometimes even human lives bartered as if they were another commodity. You let the sound wash over you, both comforting and unsettling, knowing these exchanges would eventually knit together distant lands into a web that became empire. The air thickens with the scent of burning acacia wood, and sparks lift into the darkness. Your eyelids grow heavy, but you force yourself to stay awake, for the desert always hides secrets. Beyond the palm shadows you sense movement, a lone figure slipping between trees. Perhaps it's only a herdsman checking his flock, but some whisper it could be the desert spirit who blesses or curses those who sleep near wells. The cycle repeats day after day: walk, thirst, arrival, relief. It is here, in these small cycles of survival, that Kanem's first strength takes shape. The tribes learn endurance, patience, the art of waiting out droughts and storms. You realize that the very fragility of life here forged a resilience that would later carry them into kingship. The empire does not yet exist, but its people are already trained by the desert to endure. You close your eyes briefly, hearing only the slow rhythm of camels shifting in their sleep. Above, a star streaks across the sky, a brief white flame fading into eternity. In the silence that follows, you feel it, the sense that history itself is waiting to unfold, balanced on the fragile edge of survival and ambition. The desert morning begins in pale silver, the air cool enough to make you draw your cloth closer around your shoulders. You stand with the caravan as the camels groan and stretch their long necks, bending toward waterskins before the march resumes. Somewhere beyond the dunes lies Njimi, the city that will become the capital of Kanem. But before stone walls and royal courts, there are kingsmen whose names blur between legend and history, men who lay the foundations of power in a world still half wrapped in myth. The Saifawa dynasty is said to descend from a man named Saif ibn di Yazan, a hero from distant Yemen whose stories ripple across the sands. You hear the tale murmured by a trader beside the fire, how Saif fled into Africa, his bloodline mingling with the tribes of the Lake Chad basin, his descendants claiming divine favor. The words feel like smoke curling with mystery. Historians still argue whether this connection to Arabia was literal, a thread carried by migrants, or merely a crafted legend meant to drape the kings of Kanem in borrowed sanctity. Yet in the telling, the power of belief becomes its own reality. You picture the first kings, the early Mai rulers whose tents rose higher than others, whose words commanded silence around the fire. They were men who bound tribes into allegiance, demanding loyalty through gifts, threats, or the promise of divine right. The air around them would have been heavy with incense, their faces partly veiled, their presence made sacred by ritual. You walk through the vision of such a gathering, banners, fluttering cattle herds, presented as tribute warriors, standing tall with spears that glint in the sun. But kingship in Kanem was not only about spectacle, it was about survival. The rulers controlled the wells, the grazing lands, the caravan routes. Whoever held these arteries of life commanded more than men, they commanded the desert itself. You imagine the May seated on a carved stool surrounded by advisors, deciding whether to grant safe passage to traders from the north or to close off the routes until tribute was paid. Their decisions stretched like ripples through the desert, touching lives far beyond their immediate circle. There are hints, too, of mystical weight attached to these rulers. It is said that some of the early kings could read the stars, their counsel rooted in celestial wisdom. Others were thought to commune with spirits of the desert, asking guidance before campaigns or trade ventures. The line between priest and king often blurred, and in your imagination you see a ruler lifting his hand toward the night sky, claiming the favor of unseen powers as much as earthly might. You feel the tension of these beginnings, tribes uniting, but not yet settled power, fragile but growing. A sudden gust of wind sweeps across the sand, reminding you how easily everything here can shift. Even the mightiest of rulers was at the mercy of the desert storms. The Saifawa learned early to present themselves as chosen, as destined, their dynasty an anchor against the uncertainty of shifting sands. The caravan pauses at midday and you rest under the meager shade of a canvas awning. The heat presses against your skin, a suffocating blanket. You sip sparingly from a leather water skin, its liquid warmed by the sun but still precious. Around you, traders speak of names Dugwa Humai kings remembered in fragments of oral tradition. Some say they commanded thousands of warriors. Others claim they were little more than chiefs of extended families. The truth may be somewhere in between, but as the voices weave their stories, you feel how legend and fact entwine, indistinguishable in the haze of memory. You walk on again, imagining yourself as part of those early courts. Perhaps you carry a spear sworn to defend the Maya. Perhaps you bring tribute of goats or woven cloth. You step into the circle of authority where the king's eyes rest upon you, weighing loyalty, measuring devotion. The moment stretches and you feel the heartbeat of empire beginning, pulsing faintly but steadily beneath the desert sky. The sun begins to dip again, painting the sand in amber and shadow. A hush settles over the caravan, as if everyone senses that something greater is approaching. Ahead lies not only Njimi but the promise of kingship, the transformation of scattered tribes into an empire that will echo across centuries. The Saifawa kings cloaked in legend are ready to step from myth into power, and you find yourself walking beside them, carried into the current of their rising destiny. The horizon sharpens, and through the heat shimmer you catch sight of walls low at first, then taller, their outlines resolving into mud-brick ramparts baked hard by the desert sun. And Njimi, the capital of Kanem, rises slowly into view, not a glittering palace of marble, but a stronghold of clay earth and determination. You step closer, and the scent of smoke, roasted millet and animals begins to drift across the air. For a people who have endured years of shifting camps and fragile oases, this walled city feels like permanence carved into the sands. You walk along the packed road, dust clinging to your sandals as caravans funnel toward the gates. Camels kneel with groaning sighs, their loads unfastened by handlers whose faces are shaded by indigo cloth. Children dart between the crowd, their laughter mingling with the bray of donkeys and the call of hawkers selling dates and gourds of water. For the first time in your long journey, you feel the density of life gather around you, no longer scattered fires in the desert, but a hive of sound and movement. The walls of Njimi are thick, layered with mud, reinforced by timber, and every crack is patched with care. You run your hand across the surface, the texture rough beneath your palm. On the parapet above, a guard leans lazily on a spear, his gaze sweeping across the caravan below. The city is alive with rhythm. Inside, narrow alleys wind between clustered homes, each built from packed earth, their roofs of reed or wood. Smoke spirals upward from hearths where women stir millet porridge or fry fritters of bean flour, their voices rising in song to steady the day's work. At the heart of Njimi lies the palace compound, an enclosure of larger walls and guarded gates. Here, the Mai holds court, seated on a carved wooden throne, covered with leather and cloth dyed in saffron and russet. The palace is not gilded yet. Its very order conveys power. Courtyards swept clean drums, standing ready to announce decrees. Guards in neat rows carrying spears tipped with iron. You picture yourself stepping softly through its entrance, the air inside, scented faintly with incense, the quiet hum of attendants echoing off clay walls. A traveller at your side whispers that Njimi is more than a city, it is a ritual space. Ceremonies here bind the king to both the land and the spirits that guard it. In dimly lit chambers, sacrifices are offered, and blessings sought before major decisions. Some believe that the city itself is ringed with invisible guardians, desert spirits bound by ancient pacts. When storms sweep down from the north, rattling the gates with their fury, the people trust those unseen forces to hold the walls steady. Historians still argue whether Njimi was founded in the 9th or 10th century, and whether it grew from a fortified camp or was deliberately designed as a capital. The uncertainty lingers, yet as you walk through its streets, the question feels almost irrelevant. What matters is that here, for the first time, Kanem crystallizes into a place you can touch, smell, and hear, a capital that breathes with the pulse of authority. The marketplace is where you pause, drawn by the music of voices haggling. Traders from the north lay out salt blocks gleaming like crystal. From the south come bundles of ivory tusks curling like frozen waves. Locals display baskets of grain gourds of beer, hides tanned into supple leather. You drift among them, each stall a story of the empire's growing reach. The air is thick with smells, sweet dates, pungent goat fat, sharp smoke from cooking fires. A griot sits nearby, plucking strings of a lute, weaving stories of kings and ancestors into song. His words coil into the crowd, half history, half enchantment, holding listeners in their spell. In a corner of the market you see a small shrine, its clay walls daubed with white patterns. Women stop there whispering prayers before lifting water jars onto their heads. Children bow quickly, scattering grains of millet as offering. Even as Islam begins to filter into Kanem, the old ways hold fast here, each corner of the city humming with spiritual presence. You feel the blend of worlds, practical trade beside mystical devotion woven into the fabric of Njimi. As dusk falls, the walls glow with fading light, their shadows long against the sand. Drums echo from the palace announcing the closing of the gates. You stand still for a moment, breathing in the cool air, letting the murmur of the city settle over you. Njimi feels like a promise, a declaration that the Kanem-Bornu Empire will not merely pass like nomads through the dunes, but will root itself in stone mud and memory. The desert opens again beyond Njimi, wide as eternity, but now your eyes see it differently. You have watched the city walls rise, have heard the drums of kingship, and so every caravan track feels like a thread linking Kanem to the larger world. The soft bells on camel harnesses chime, and once more you follow the line of traders stretching into the dunes. Their cargo is more than sacks and bundles, it is the lifeblood of empire. Salt. You taste its sharpness in the air as blocks wrapped in leather are hoisted onto camelbacks. The salt comes from mines far to the north, from Bilma and Tagaza, where men toil in shimmering heat to cut slabs from the earth. Each block glitters pale in the sun, its value immense. You watch as a trader strokes one with reverence, murmuring that salt preserves life itself, keeping meat from rotting, giving flavor to bland grains. In the markets of Kanem, a single slab can be exchanged for ivory or livestock, sometimes even for human captives, whose lives are bound into this relentless trade. The caravans move in slow, patient rhythm, and you join them. Camels sway like ships on a gentle tide, their padded feet leaving soft marks in the sand. Around you, men wear indigo veils that stain their skin blue, the fabric both practical against the sun and mystical in reputation. Some say the cloth itself carries protection, its deep color warding off evil spirits. You tug at your own head, covering, feeling the weight of the fabric, the scratch of dust against your cheeks. Ivory gleams next in your vision. Curved tusks lash tightly, their pale sheen catching the sun. From the south they come cut from elephants in the forests beyond the savanna, carried northward to be carved into ornaments, crosses and handles. In distant markets as far away as Tripoli or Cairo, you touch one tusk lightly as you pass its smooth surface, cool despite the heat. For a moment you think of the animal it once belonged to, great and wild, its memory now reduced to cargo, and then gold, small nuggets carried in pouches, sometimes hidden under clothing for fear of thieves. You hear whispers that across the Sahel, in lands to the west, there are rivers that birth gold dust like sand, their wealth inexhaustible. The Kanem rulers seek it hungrily, knowing that gold speaks a universal language. The Mai of Kanem sits in his palace at Njimi, yet his influence stretches outward on the back of every camel loaded with these treasures. But alongside wealth flows the darker current of trade slaves. You see men and women bound together with rope walking under guard. Some are captives taken in raids against southern neighbors, others seized as tribute. Their faces are solemn eyes turned downward dust, clinging to their ankles. The caravan leaders speak of their price in faraway markets, where their labor will feed the appetite of empires beyond the desert. It is a heavy sight, one that presses against your chest. Yet it is part of the rhythm of Kanem, for power is measured not only in wealth but in the lives controlled and traded. Historians still argue whether Kanem's trade dominance was established by sheer geography, its position near Lake Chad, a crossroads of routes, or whether it was actively built by Saifawa kings who imposed tolls, guarded caravans, and cultivated alliances with Berber traders. Perhaps it was both chance and strategy entwined like braided rope. You imagine the Mai sending out guard spears, glinting, ensuring safe passage, so long as the caravans honored his authority. In this way, empire grows not only from conquest but from trust in its control of trade. Night falls as the caravan halts. Fires spark in the darkness, throwing shadows across the dunes. You sit with traders who chew dried dates and drink warm water from goatskin bags. Their voices carry into the cool air, telling tales of journey storms that swallowed whole caravans' wells, that vanished overnight bandits who rose like phantoms from the sand. Yet they also speak of riches of markets glittering with goods of kings who bow to the wealth carried on camelbacks. One trader leans, close eyes glinting in the firelight, and whispers of mystical guides. He swears that sometimes in the deepest desert a glowing figure appears, half man, half flame, walking ahead of caravans to lead them safely through shifting dunes. Others say the desert itself listens, granting favor to those who sing as they march. You close your eyes and hear the rhythm of a chant, low and steady, weaving through the crackle of fire. When dawn returns, you rise and brush sand from your skin. The caravan lifts itself again, groaning camels kneeling and then swaying upward. The sun climbs, merciless yet familiar. As you step forward, you realize the truth. The Kanem-Bornu Empire is not only walled cities or royal courts, it is this endless movement across the sands, this pulse of trade that binds desert to savanna, north to south, life to life. And in that rhythm you walk on. The desert is never empty. Even in its stillness it hums with presences you cannot quite see. Tonight, as you sit beside the fire with the caravan, the sky, a black bowl jeweled with stars, the men around you begin to murmur stories of beings who drift between the dunes. You lean in, your face warmed by the flames as shadows flicker across their features. Their voices lower, as if wary that speaking too loud might summon what they describe. They tell of spirits that glide along the ridges of sand, cloaked in veils of wind. Sometimes they are guardians leading lost travelers to water or shade. Sometimes they are deceivers luring men toward mirages until thirst consumes them. You imagine such figures flickering just beyond vision, faint lights moving where no fire should be, footsteps in the sand that vanish without trace. The desert, for all its emptiness, feels crowded with unseen company. The caravan master insists that offerings must always be made when a journey begins, a scattering of millet on the ground, a whispered prayer at the well. He tells you that camels themselves are attuned to these spirits, sometimes stopping abruptly, refusing to move until appeasements are given. You recall earlier today how one camel halted at the crest of a dune, groaning and kneeling, though no obstacle was visible. The men whispered quickly, tossing a few grains and pouring a splash of water into the sand. Only then did the animal rise again. Mystical tales linger everywhere in Kanem. Some say that Njimi itself is protected by jinn who stand in visible guard at its gates. Others whisper that storms are not accidents of weather, but the breath of giants who wander the Sahara, their exhalations swirling into walls of sand that can bury whole caravans. You picture one now, a vast form outlined in the stars, each gust you feel on your cheek, nothing more than a sigh from its restless lungs. Historians still argue whether such tales were merely metaphors woven by weary travelers or whether they carried the weight of religious practice embedded into daily survival. Yet as you sit by the fire, the desert seems too alive to dismiss. A sudden wind lifts scattering embers and tugging at your veil, and for a moment you feel eyes on you, though no one else moves. You exhale slowly, reminding yourself that imagination and belief are woven together here, inseparable as sand and wind. Beyond the firelight, a griot begins to sing. His voice is low, carrying like smoke, and his words describe a time when the desert spirit struck a bargain with the first kings. The rulers promised to respect the wells and protect the caravans, and in return the spirits granted prosperity. The griot's fingers pluck a lute string, the sound trembling through the cool night. You close your eyes, letting the music carry you until the boundaries between story and reality blur. When dawn breaks, the caravan moves again. You trudge through the soft sand, the air growing warmer by the hour. Ahead, the horizon shimmers, and suddenly it is not just sand but water. You see a broad mirage, lake, blue and rippling. The traders murmur, not surprised, for mirages are common. Yet one man insists some mirages are doorways showing real lakes in another realm, places of abundance that only the chosen can reach. You blink, and the vision fades, leaving only sand glittering under the merciless sun. The day grows harsh, and by afternoon the wind rises. Sand lashes against your cheeks, stinging your skin, filling your ears with hiss. The sky turns a muted gold as particles blur the air. The caravan huddles together, camels pressed, flank to flank, men wrapping their veils tighter. Within the swirl of storm, you almost see shapes, figures with long limbs striding across the dunes, their movements fluid as the wind. Fear grips you, but also wonder, for this is exactly what the old tales warned storms are, not only nature, but beings passing near. By evening, the storm eases the sky, returning to its deep indigo. The caravan is coated in dust, every crease filled with grit, yet still alive, still moving. Round the fires that night, men thank the spirits for sparing them. You sip water, its taste faintly metallic, and listen to the steady breath of camels at rest. Above, the stars shine with renewed sharpness, as if washed clean. You realize then that in Kanem Empire is not only built on walls and trade routes, but on the relationship with the unseen. The belief in guardians and deceivers shapes how men act when they pause what they fear and how they find courage to walk on. You feel it settle into you as well, the sense that you are never alone in this desert, that eyes follow from dunes and winds, that every step is part of a conversation with forces older than any king. And so you rest under the desert sky, cradled by silence, lulled by the hum of unseen companions. The desert journey narrows toward a new kind of horizon, not only the shimmer of dunes and oases, but the weight of sacred words carried on parchment. You walk into Njimi once more, past the thick mud brick walls and crowded market stalls, and notice a change in the air. The chants of griots still rise, the shrines still draw offerings, but another sound has joined them, the rhythmic recitation of Quranic verses, the syllables curling like song. Kanem's rulers, the Saifawa, begin to embrace Islam first as a tool of diplomacy, then as a core of their legitimacy. You hear it whispered in the palace courtyard, envoys from the north, men of learning, draped in white robes, arrive bearing books bound in leather and written in elegant script. They bring not only knowledge but prestige for aligning with the great Islamic world, links Kanem to Cairo, to Tunis, even to Mecca itself. You picture the Mai seated on his throne, tilting his head as scholars explain the verses, nodding not only to faith, but to the power it bestows. Still, adoption is never simple. Historians still argue whether Kanem's rulers converted out of genuine belief or to secure stronger trade and alliances. Perhaps both are true. You walk among the courtiers, some bowing their heads in prayer, others still quietly sacrificing at old shrines, as if hedging their loyalty between the seen and unseen worlds. The air itself seems layered chants of imams overlapping with murmurs to ancestral spirits. You enter a madrasa, a simple structure of clay walls where children recite lines from wooden tablets inked with Arabic script. Their voices rise in unison, steady and hypnotic. The teacher paces slowly, a slender stick in hand, to point at the words. The rhythm of recitation feels almost like a lullaby, its steady cadence wrapping the learners in memory. You listen and the unfamiliar language hums in your chest like a gentle drumbeat. Islam brings more than prayer, it reshapes law and authority. In the palace you hear discussions of Sharia, of justice, measured not just by tribal custom, but by divine guidance. Disputes over land or trade are judged with new weight, as scribes record outcomes on parchment instead of leaving them only to memory. You run your fingers across one of these documents, the ink faded but deliberate, each curve of the letters steady as the desert stars. The Mai commissions mosques, their walls rising with simple beauty-flat roofs, supported by wooden beams, plastered surfaces, smoothed by many hands. From their doorways comes the call to prayer, a haunting cry that arcs across the marketplace. You pause, listening to its echo, and for a moment everything seems to stop. Traders halting mid-haggle, women resting their water jars, guards lowering their spears. The empire, even if briefly, breathes together in reverence, and yet beneath the surface resistance lingers. You see women still tying charms to their children's wrists, protective amulets filled with cowrie shells or herbs. Hunters still whisper invocations to the spirits of the forest before they set out. Some griots sing of Saifawa kings, as chosen not by Allah alone, but by ancient desert beings who walk unseen. The fusion of faiths is not conflict but coexistence, layers resting together like sand and stone. As evening falls, you wander into a courtyard where a scholar from Cairo debates with a local elder. The scholar insists that idols must be destroyed, that all guidance comes from the Quran. The elder shakes his head, saying the ancestors cannot be cast aside, for their spirits linger in the winds and the wells. The debate grows heated, yet respectful voices rising and falling with conviction. You realize you are listening to the sound of a society in transition, balancing between past and future. Mystical stories entwine even with this new faith. A man near you whispers that certain imams in Kanem possess the gift of baraka, divine blessing that allows them to heal the sick with words alone. Others say some scholars can write Quranic verses onto slips of parchment, then dissolve the ink in water to create a potion of protection. You imagine sipping such a liquid, the taste metallic, believing that divine words now flow inside your very body. The night draws close and the marketplace quiets. Above the stars shimmer eternal witnesses to change. You feel the desert's rhythm altered, now the chants of Islam braided into the heartbeat of Kanem. The Mai sits in his court, a ruler no longer only of earth and sand, but now linked to the vast current of the Islamic world. And you, walking softly through Njimi's alleys, sense the shift. Power is no longer only guarded by spirits of the dunes, but also by the weight of sacred texts and the authority of prayer. The morning air vibrates with tension. From the walls of Njimi, you hear the distant roll of drums, steady and low, like the heartbeat of an approaching storm. Men gather in the courtyards, spears tipped with iron shields, painted with white markings, and horses pawing at the ground. The Kanem rulers are no longer content with holding the desert and its caravans. Their gaze has turned southward toward the open savanna and the fertile lands beyond. You step into their march, feeling the swell of ambition push against the limits of sand. The savanna stretches wide, greener than the desert, yet still harsh. Tall grasses wave in the wind, whispering like a restless sea. Herds of antelopes scatter at the sound of drums, and birds lift in sudden flocks, their wings flashing against the sky. Here the kings of Kanem seek not only pasture for their herds, but tribute from neighboring chiefs. The empire needs food to feed its growing cities, men to swell its armies, and captives to trade across the desert routes. You sense the hunger in every measured step of the warriors beside you. Historians still argue whether Kanem's southward expansion was motivated primarily by trade routes or by the need to secure fertile soil around Lake Chad. Perhaps it was both, for the lake's basin offers abundant fish, rich farmland, and connections to communities whose alliances or subjugation could feed empire. You walk beside the warriors as they cross rivers, their feet sinking into soft mud, the cool water tugging at your ankles after weeks of sand. The contrast between desert and savanna feels like a dream, one world flowing into another. The war drums grow louder. Ahead, the armies of a rival chief appear, spears raised, voices chanting. You feel the air thicken with anticipation, the moment before clash stretched thin as bowstring. The battle that follows is not endless slaughter, but a blur of noise and dust horses rearing, men shouting, drums pounding faster. Your breath quickens, even though your body moves gently through this imagined scene, as if your heartbeat is caught in the rhythm of their struggle. In the end, Kanem's armies push forward their spears, flashing, their cavalry circling. Tribes fall into submission, some willingly, some after resistance. You see captives bound and herded northward, their faces a mixture of defiance and fear. You watch fields claimed as tribute millet, harvested not for its growers but for Njimi's stores. The empire stretches its grasp, weaving new lands into its fabric. Yet conquest is not only violence. At night, around fires in captured villages, griots sing both to soothe and to persuade. They recount the glory of the Mai, his right to rule, his descent from ancient heroes. The conquered listen, their children leaning against them, and slowly the story begins to plant roots. Power is not secured only by the spear, but by the tale that follows it. The land itself seems to respond. You walk across fields where the soil is dark and fertile, unlike the dust of the desert. The air is heavy with the scent of damp earth fish, drying on racks, smoke from cooking pots thick with stew. This abundance feeds the growing strength of Kanem, yet it also carries risk. The farther the empire stretches, the more fragile its hold. You sense it already, the difficulty of binding desert and savanna, oasis and river into a single unity. Mystical stories cling to these conquests as well. Some say the Mai's war drums are enchanted, their skins stretched from sacred animals, their beat capable of summoning fear into the hearts of enemies before the first spear is thrown. Others claim warriors carried charms inscribed with Quranic verses hidden beneath their tunics, making them untouchable by blades. You picture the flash of iron, the gleam of amulets against sweat-darkened skin, the mingling of faith and superstition in the chaos of war. As the armies return to Njimi, their march is slow but triumphant. Horses carry spoils, men sing of victory, drums echo against the night sky. The Mai appears at the city gates cloaked in indigo and saffron, his presence radiating calm power. He receives tribute before the gathered crowds, cattle lowing, grain-piled, slaves kneeling. You stand among the people, the air thick with dust and pride, and realize how far Kanem has stretched since its days of fragile oases. The empire breathes deeper now, its chest swelling with new lands, its heartbeat carried on drums that echo across savanna and desert alike. And you, standing amid the rhythm of conquest, feel the vastness of a kingdom that is no longer just surviving, but expanding, commanding, hungering still for more. The marketplace buzzes with voices, men trading salt for ivory, women balancing gourds of water on their heads, children darting through alleys with laughter that echoes against the mud-brick walls. But tonight, your steps carry you not toward the noise of commerce, but into the quieter spaces behind the palace walls, where the influence of queens and royal women moves like an unseen current. Power in Kanem has always been complex, shaped not only by the Mai's commands, but by those who stand near his throne, sometimes in shadow, sometimes in open council. You enter the women's quarters, the Musuri, where the air is rich with the scent of shea butter and perfumed smoke. Fabrics dyed in russet teal and indigo hang from wooden beams, their colors glowing in the dim light of oil lamps. Women sit weaving or grinding millet, their bracelets chiming softly as they work. Yet these are not merely attendants or consorts, they are the silent architects of influence. Mothers of kings, sisters, wives, and daughters all form part of the network that steadies the dynasty's line. One figure rises above them all, the Queen Mother, known as the Majira. She is both counselor and guardian of succession, her word carrying weight that even seasoned generals heed. You imagine her seated on a carved stool, her eyes lined with kohl, speaking slowly while the court listens. A flick of her hand can elevate one prince or doom another, and her blessing is as crucial as the Mai's decree. Historians still argue how much overt authority these women held, whether they were confined to influence behind the curtains of the palace, or if they truly stood beside kings in matters of law and diplomacy. What is clear, however, is that the Saifawa dynasty endured not merely because of men's ambitions, but because of women's steady hands guiding the fragile thread of succession. You hear whispers of alliances sealed through marriage, daughters given to chiefs of neighboring clans, their unions binding loyalty stronger than iron chains. You walk through a vision of one such ceremony, drums pounding softly, women dressed in bright cloth embroidered with cowries, the bride veiled yet radiant. Behind the celebration lies a strategy as sharp as any spear, each marriage a net thrown wider to secure Kanem's reach. There are mystical undertones too. Some women are believed to carry spiritual gifts, their dreams interpreted as omens, their words treated as prophecy. One tale lingers in your ears, a queen mother who foresaw a storm before the army's march, warning the Mai not to leave Njimi. He ignored her counsel, and days later a sandstorm swallowed half his forces. Since then, women's voices in the palace were sometimes treated as the whisper of spirits themselves. You drift further inside the compound, where the younger women laugh together, braiding each other's hair and painting hands with henna. Their giggles rise into the warm night, but even here you sense an undercurrent of watchfulness. Each of them may one day be tied to politics, her fate, and children's lives shaping the dynasty's stability. Their laughter, sweet as it is, carries an edge of awareness. Every glance, every word may ripple outward into the balance of power. In the cool evening, the palace drums begin to sound again, calling men to council. The women remain behind the curtain, yet their influence hovers like perfume unseen but undeniable. A prince rises to argue his case for command of the cavalry, but you notice his eyes flick toward his mother, standing at the edge of the courtyard. She does not speak, but her slow nod is enough. His brothers fall silent. The decision is made without a word from the Emayash. As you leave the quarters, the moonlight paints the walls in silver. Outside the city sleeps, yet within these walls the threads of succession and power are always being rewoven. You realize then that Kanem's empire is not only guarded by spears, caravans or scholars, but also by the unseen strength of women who move quietly through corridors and chambers, shaping the very destiny of kings. Their power hums softly in the night, steady and enduring, like the faint chime of bracelets in the dark. The night feels heavy as you walk the streets of Njimi. The air is thick with smoke from cooking fires, and distant drums echo against the walls of the palace. You sense unease, a shifting weight in the city. Where once the Mai's throne seemed unshakable, now whispers rise like wind through the reeds. Succession struggles, betrayals, the shifting of power. Inside the palace, the carved wooden throne gleams in the lamplight. A new ruler sits there, his robe of indigo and saffron rich, but his eyes uncertain. Around him, courtiers murmur, some loyal, some restless. Kanem's strength has always depended on the stability of the Saifawa line, but bloodlines are rarely simple. Sons of different wives, each backed by mothers, brothers or chiefs, rise to challenge one another. You watch the tension ripple across the court, each glance sharp as a blade. Historians still argue over the scale of these succession disputes. Some accounts describe violent coups, assassinations, carried out under the cover of night. Others suggest a slower decay. Princes scheming in silence, armies divided in loyalty provinces drifting away from the center. Perhaps both are true, for power struggles often unfold in layers, some hidden, some brutal. You feel it in the air, the fragility of empire. The May who commands today may fall tomorrow undone, not by foreign enemies, but by brothers at his side. The city walls are strong, but inside those walls suspicion seeps like water through cracks. You step softly across the courtyard, hearing faint arguments, one faction insisting on strict loyalty to the eldest son, another whispering that the younger has divine blessing. In these shifting times, even the spirits are said to choose sides. Some tales insist that the ghosts of past rulers walk the halls of Njimi, appearing in dreams to warn or to bless. One story lingers a Mai wavering between war and peace. Claimed he was visited at night by his grandfather's spirit, who placed a hand on his shoulder and whispered which path to choose. Whether vision or imagination, the choice that followed reshaped Kanem's course for years. Amid this turmoil, trade continues, though less steadily. Caravans approach the gates, unsure whether they will be welcomed with safety or squeezed for extra tribute. Merchants mutter of instability, their eyes wary as they hand over goods. The flow of salt ivory and slaves falters when rulers change too often, and you feel how empire can shrink as easily as it swells. Yet Kanem endures. For every coup, another prince rises, another court stabilizes the throne. The resilience of its people, trained by desert endurance, seems to hold the state together. You walk into the streets again, where life goes on, despite palace intrigues. Women pound millet children, chase goats griots, sing of kings past and present, as if to remind the people that history continues even when the present wavers. One griot's voice follows you through the night. He sings of the Saifawa line as unbroken, each ruler linked to Saif ibn di Yazan, no matter the quarrels. His song is less about fact than about continuity shaping memory, so that even instability appears as part of a destined pattern. You close your eyes, listening to his words, drift like smoke, and you realize how narrative itself can be a weapon, keeping faith alive when politics tremble. The palace drums beat again, a steady rhythm meant to reassure the city. Soldiers march in the courtyard, their spears gleaming, their chants firm. Yet behind the walls you know the struggle continues, alliances shifting like dunes in the wind. You walk away, feeling both the fragility and the endurance of Kanem, the empire caught in a constant dance between fracture and survival. The throne may shake, but it does not yet fall. The desert has taught its people how to bend without breaking, how to endure storms and rise again. And so even in the shadow of betrayal, Kanem lives on, waiting for its next breath of strength. The desert narrows, the savanna widens, and soon your path bends toward water. At last, you hear the lapping of waves against shore, the cries of birds circling overhead, and the smell of reeds carried on the wind. Before you stretches the vast, shimmering expanse of Lake Chad. It glows in the sun like a mirror of the sky, fringed with green abundance papyrus millet fields, and herds grazing along the banks. After centuries of desert struggle, Kanem shifts westward, retreating from Njimi to be reborn in Bornu, a land rich and alive. You step into a settlement by the lake, its houses built of reeds and mud canoes pulled onto the shore nets, drying in the sun. Fishermen mend their lines, children splash in shallow waters, and women carry pots filled with fish, their scales gleaming silver in the light. The air smells of wood smoke and roasted tilapia, a fragrance so different from the dry desert you've left behind. Bornu's heart beats not in walls of clay, but in the living abundance of water. This move is both survival and renewal. Succession struggles and invasions had weakened Kanem, forcing the Saifawa dynasty westward. Yet here in Bornu they found strength again. The lake provides food in plenty, its fertile lands allowing grain to grow in wide fields. Trade routes bend here too, linking not only to the desert, but also deeper into the savanna and forests beyond. You watch caravans arrive, their camels laden with salt, and see canoes slide from the lake filled with fish, ivory, and goods from southern rivers. The blend of land and water trade makes Bornu a crossroads richer than Njimi ever was. Historians still argue whether this westward shift was a collapse of Kanem or a strategic adaptation by the Saifawa. Was it retreat or renewal? As you stand on the shore, you sense it as both the end of one chapter, the opening of another. Like water changing course, empire bends but continues to flow. Bornu grows quickly into a powerful state. The new capital, Birni Gazagamu, rises not of desert mud alone, but with the freshness of lakeside life. Its streets are wider, its markets busier, its mosques louder with prayer. You walk among the stalls where dried fish is traded for salt cloth and iron. The hum of commerce is constant voices mixing in Arabic Kanuri Hausa and other tongues. The empire's identity broadens here, more open, more diverse, yet still anchored by the Saifawa line. Mystical stories cling to Lake Chad itself. Locals whisper that beneath its waters lies a hidden city, visible only at night when the moon is full. Some fishermen claim to have seen flickering lights beneath the waves, as if houses glow in a world just out of reach. Others tell of water spirits, half human, half fish, who bless or curse those who cast their nets. You lean down, touching the cool water, and feel a shiver of possibility that the lake indeed holds secrets beyond sight. The Mai's authority thrives in Bornu. You picture him standing at the edge of the lake, his robe trailing, offering prayers as the wind ripples the surface. Behind him stand soldiers, their spears raised, and beside him scholars, their books tucked under arms. This union of strength and learning feels steadier here, as if the lake itself lends permanence. At night you rest on the lake shore. The air is thick with the hum of insects, the croak of frogs, the distant splash of fish. Fires burn low, their smoke drifting into the dark. You close your eyes, listening to the gentle rhythm of water against the bank, and feel the difference from the desert's silence. Here sound never stops. Life hums around you, constant, abundant, eternal. Bornu is a rebirth, not only for the Saifawa, but for the memory of empire itself. Where Njimi once rose from the dust, Birni Gazargamu now rises from the water's edge, a city rooted in renewal. You breathe in the damp, fertile air and realize that Kanem-Bornu has begun again, its heart beating stronger than before. The sun climbs over Bornu's plains, gilding the grasslands in amber light. Drums sound in the capital, Birni Gazargamu, a steady pulse that summons the city to attention. You walk through its streets past stalls crowded with merchants and notice how everything feels sharper, more ordered. Bornu has found its warrior king Idris Alauma, whose reign in the 16th century transforms the empire into something stronger, more disciplined, more feared. You step into the palace courtyard. Idris sits upon a throne draped with indigo cloth, his bearing firm but calm. His presence commands silence before he speaks, and when his voice carries it, does so with clarity, justice, law, reform. Soldiers kneel before him, their spears grounded, their tunics neat. Unlike rulers before him who leaned on fragile alliances, Idris builds authority through order. He reforms the army, trains cavalry, introduces chainmail and new tactics. You hear the thunder of hooves as Bornu's horsemen sweep across the plain, their armor glinting like scales of some ancient beast. Historians still argue whether Idris's greatest strength lay in his military skill or his statesmanship. Certainly both defined him. His campaigns stretched Bornu's reach across Hausaland, across the desert, and deep into rival territories. Yet he was not only a conqueror, he was a reformer. You walk through the city and see his influence, new laws inscribed and enforced, judges trained in Islamic jurisprudence, taxes, standardized corruption, punished. For the first time, the empire feels like a state that breathes with unity, not just a patchwork of chiefs. You pause at a mosque where scholars gather, their voices rising in debate. Idris brings them here, encouraging study, inviting jurists from Cairo and Fez. The air inside is thick with incense and ink scrolls unfurled across reed mats. Some discuss trade, others law, still others, the balance of religion and kingship. Idris himself listens, weighing knowledge as carefully as he weighs strategy. He is remembered for his piety as much as his discipline. You imagine him rising at dawn to pray, his forehead pressed against the earth, before donning his armor for the day's march. Mystical tales cling to him too. Some whisper that Idris carried a sword, blessed by an imam, its blade said to gleam even in darkness, striking fear into enemies before it touched them. Others say he could not be killed in battle, protected by baraka, divine favor, which flowed through his words and his rule. Whether myth or truth, such stories magnify the aura of authority that surrounds him. You march with his army across the savanna grass, bending beneath the rush of hooves. War drums pound like thunder horns, blare, and the cavalry moves in disciplined lines, nothing like the looser formations of earlier times. You feel the earth shudder beneath their charge. The enemies scatter, some surrendering, some absorbed into Bornu's ranks. Idris consolidates his victories not with endless slaughter, but by planting garrisons, establishing governors, weaving conquered lands into the fabric of his empire. At night, you return with him to Birni Gazargamu. Fires glow along the palace walls, guards patrol in pairs, and the city hums with steady order. You see grain being measured into storehouses, taxes recorded carefully in ink judgments, carried out with fairness that even common people acknowledge. A woman selling fish at the market whispers that under Idris, theft has dwindled, disputes are settled swiftly, and the streets feel safer than ever before. The empire breathes more evenly now, like a chest freed of strain. Still debates linger. Some elders grumble that Idris has tilted too much toward foreign scholars, that his reforms distance Bornu from older ways. Others praise his blending of tradition with Islamic law, seeing in him a balance that secures both continuity and progress. You walk past them, sensing the tension, but also the stability that his reign imposes. His vision is larger than theirs, stretching beyond the lake and the desert into a connected world. As dawn breaks again, you climb a rise outside the city. Behind you lies Bornu, its capital, thriving, its people more secure. Ahead the plains roll endless, touched by mist, promising new campaigns and challenges. Idris Alauma's reign is not only a moment of power, but a hinge in the empire's history, the point where Kanem-Bornu transforms from fragile endurance into disciplined greatness. You breathe in the cool morning air, the sound of drums still echoing faintly from the city, and feel the steady weight of his legacy pressing into the earth. The morning opens with a hum, not of drums or marching cavalry, but of voices layered together in the markets of Bornu. You drift into Birni Gazargamu's central square, where the air is alive with sound traders, calling prices donkeys, braying pots, clattering griots, singing fragments of stories to attract listeners. The scent of fried bean cakes mingles with that of dried fish, incense and leather. For all its wars and laws, the Kanem-Bornu Empire lives just as much in its marketplaces, where people gather not only to trade, but to exchange ideas and stories. You pause at a stall stacked high with salt blocks, their pale surfaces gleaming in the sunlight. Across the way, baskets of kola nuts from the forests lie in neat piles, their bitter scent sharp in the air. A man displays indigo cloth folded into careful squares, while another offers carved ivory pieces that gleam like frozen moonlight. Between them, scribes sit at low tables offering to write letters, contracts or Quranic verses for charms. It feels as if the entire world has been compressed into this one-place desert savanna and forest converging under the open sky. Beyond trade, you hear the soft murmur of scholarship. In a shaded corner of the mosque's courtyard, men sit cross-legged on reed mats, wooden tablets in their hands. Their voices rise together, reciting verses, the rhythm steady and hypnotic. A teacher walks slowly among them, correcting intonations, tapping the wood with a stick. You watch children run errands for scholars, bringing ink parchment or cool water, their eyes wide as they listen to words that carry weight far beyond the marketplace. Islamic scholarship flourishes here, binding Bornu into a larger world. Envoys from Fez, Cairo, and even Timbuktu pass through, their robes white and their satchels filled with books. You imagine their debates filling the air, arguments over law, discussions of astronomy, questions about philosophy and faith. Their presence lends prestige to the Imai who patronizes such learning. You sense how knowledge itself becomes currency, a force as powerful as any spear. Yet amid this scholarly hum, folklore lingers. Storytellers gather small crowds near market corners, their hands carving shapes in the air as their words paint invisible worlds. One griot sings of a hunter who followed a white gazelle into the desert and found a hidden well guarded by spirits. Another speaks of an ancient queen who commanded armies with nothing but her voice. The crowd laughs, gasps, and nods their eyes wide with wonder. For a moment you see how the empire is bound not only by law and trade, but by story, by imagination, shared under the heat of day. Historians still argue how deeply this scholarship transformed ordinary life, whether the Quranic schools reached the majority of villagers or remained mostly for elites in the city. What is certain is that Kanem-Bornu's prestige grew through its reputation as a place of learning as well as of power. A merchant in the market tells you proudly that his son studies the Quran, that the boy can already recite whole surahs by heart. You see the pride in his eyes, the sense that literacy and learning are themselves blessings. Mystical practices flow alongside these teachings. A man offers small pouches filled with verses written on parchment, sewn into leather and tied with string. They are amulets said to protect against misfortune or illness. Another merchant sells water that has been used to wash ink from Quranic boards, believed to carry the blessing of the words dissolved within it. You sip such water yourself, its taste faintly bitter, and feel the mingling of faith and mystery within your chest. The marketplace does not quiet at dusk, instead it shifts. Torches are lit, shadows dance against the walls, and voices lower but do not fade. You smell roasting meat, hear flutes playing softly, watch dancers sway with slow hypnotic movements, while traders continue to whisper deals even in the glow of firelight. The mosque too remains alive, its lamps flickering as scholars continue their discussions deep into the night. You lie back at the edge of the square, your body resting against warm earth, and let the sounds wash over you. It feels as though Bornu breathes here, each inhale filled with the spice of trade, each exhale with the chant of prayer and the song of story. Kings may rule, wars may rage, but in these mosques and marketplaces the daily pulse of empire is sustained, steady, vibrant, unbroken. The night sky is clear above Bornu, yet the air feels unsettled. You sense change coming, not the steady rhythm of caravans, but the sharp crack of muskets. For centuries, Kanem-Bornu thrived on cavalry and spears, but now new weapons arrive across the desert, guns, carried by traders and mercenaries, their iron barrels glinting in firelight. The balance of power shifts, and with it the empire trembles. You walk through a camp at the edge of Birni Gazargamu, where foreign soldiers demonstrate firearms to the Mai's men. The sound of powder exploding startles even the horses who rear and snort in fear. Smoke curls into the night, acrid and thick, stinging your nose. The soldiers laugh, boasting that one musket can break a line of warriors armed with spears. The Bornu captains watch uneasily, their pride in cavalry shaken by this new thunder. Historians still argue whether it was the Ottomans, the Moroccans, or coastal traders who first flooded these lands with firearms. What matters is that the desert routes, once lifelines for salt and gold, now carry weapons that undercut the very foundations of Bornu's strength. You hear merchants whisper that routes are changing too, gold drifting westward to Songhai, slaves flowing toward new coastal ports where Europeans hunger for human lives. The desert that once enriched Bornu now begins to bypass it. The Mai tries to adapt. You imagine him sending envoys to secure muskets, hiring mercenaries who know how to wield them. Yet the empire's cavalry, proud and disciplined since the days of Idris Alauma, no longer strikes fear as it once did. You see their charges broken by volleys of gunfire, warriors collapsing before they reach enemy lines. The grasslands echo not with drums, but with sharp cracks, the rhythm of war transformed. Amid this turmoil, rivals press in. To the west, the Hausa city-states grow bolder, their walls bristling with muskets. To the north, Tuareg raiders test the weakened caravan routes. Even within Bornu, chiefs question their loyalty, some leaning toward independence as the central power falters. The empire, so long steady, begins to fray at its edges. Mystical stories emerge in these troubled times. Some say the spirits of the desert are abandoning Bornu, offended by the noise of guns. Others whisper that a curse has fallen, punishment for kings who forgot the old pacts with ancestors and spirits. You listen to an old woman chant by the lake shore, her voice trembling as she begs the water spirits to protect the people. The lake ripples in the moonlight, silent, offering no clear answer. The marketplace reflects this uncertainty. Salt is no longer as valuable as before, and traders grumble about the danger of caravans constantly harassed by raiders. You hear of slaves being marched not north into the desert, but south and west toward the Atlantic coast, where Europeans exchange them for muskets and cloth. The flow of goods has shifted like water, finding new channels, leaving Bornu stranded on the banks. Still, resilience lingers. You watch a council of elders debate fiercely, their voices rising into the night. Some call for reform, for embracing firearms fully and re-establishing control of the trade routes. Others argue for retreat, for focusing on the fertile lands around Lake Chad, letting the desert routes slip away. Their arguments echo with the desperation of a state caught between old strength and new realities. As you walk away from the city, the night quiets. The stars above remain eternal, yet below, Bornu struggles to hold its ground. The empire does not collapse in a single stroke. It weakens slowly like fabric, fraying thread by thread. You feel the sorrow of it, the weight of centuries bending under change. And yet in the silence, you also sense persistence. Fires still burn in villages, markets still open at dawn, children still chase each other through the fields. The Kanem-Bornu Empire may waver, but its people endure, carrying memory and culture forward, even as power shifts around them. The decline is real, but so is the life that continues stubborn as the desert's heartbeat. The road grows quieter now. You walk once more along the dunes, the desert wide and calm beneath a pale sky. Where once caravans groaned with salt and ivory, the tracks now seem fewer, scattered and faint. The Kanem-Bornu Empire, which once stretched its reach across deserts and savannas, now breathes more softly, its power faded but not forgotten. You pause at the lakeshore, watching ripples spread across Lake Chad. The reeds whisper in the wind, birds circle overhead, and fishermen mend their nets as they have for centuries. The Mai's palace still stands in Birni-Gazargamu, though its walls feel less certain, its court less crowded with scholars and envoys. The empire that once commanded respect from Cairo to Hausaland has shrunk into memory, its rhythm slowed, but not entirely stilled. Historians still argue when exactly Bornu's decline should be marked. Some say it began with the arrival of firearms that shattered cavalry power. Others point to shifting trade routes that bypassed the desert, flowing instead toward Atlantic ports. Still others insist it was the endless strain of succession disputes and invasions that eroded stability. Perhaps like all endings, it came not from one cause, but from many weaving together until the empire was threadbare. And yet you sense endurance in the air. Griots still sing of the Saifawa kings, their songs drifting through the night like smoke. They recount Idris Alauma's reforms, the strength of Njimi, the abundance of Bornu. Their voices keep memory alive, ensuring the empire does not vanish, but lingers in story. Even now in modern times, the Kanuri people trace their heritage to these kings, their identity rooted in a legacy that survives power's fall. Mystical tales linger too. Elders say that when the empire finally crumbled, the spirits of the desert carried its essence into the sands. On certain nights when the wind is right, some claim you can hear the faint jingle of caravan bells drifting across empty dunes, echoes of journeys that no longer pass. Others whisper that Lake Chad holds the empire's soul, its waters reflecting not just sky, but the memory of kings, scholars, traders, and dreamers. You wander through the old marketplace of Birni-Gazargamu. The stalls are fewer, Yet life continues, women selling millet children, laughing as they chase goats, men carving tools and mending nets. The grandeur of empire has faded, but the heartbeat of ordinary life endures as steady as footsteps in the sand. It strikes you that empire is not only palaces and battles, it is also these small rhythms that persist long after crowns have fallen. As night falls, you lie back on the earth. The stars scatter above the same stars that once guided caravans and armies, the same stars kings once claimed gave them divine right. The air is cool, filled with the hum of crickets and the faint rustle of grass. You close your eyes and feel the presence of centuries pressing around you, soft as a blanket. The Kanem-Bornu Empire fades into the sands, yet its memory drifts on winds in songs in the stories told under night skies. And as you breathe deeply, you realize that history itself is like the desert, always shifting, always moving, yet never truly gone. The journey slows now, the drums and caravans fading into silence. You rest on the soft edge of night where the desert air cools and the stars watch with ancient calm. The empire we have walked through, its rise, its triumphs, its struggles, has softened into memory like footprints in the sand erased gently by wind. Your breathing falls steady as you picture Lake Chad shimmering beneath the moonlight, the water stretching wide and quiet, reflecting a sky filled with endless constellations. The hum of distant insects, the faint lap of water, the occasional cry of a night bird, all of it gathers around you like a lullaby, soothing and unbroken. The heat of the day has passed, and now cool air brushes across your skin, gentle and reassuring. Let your body sink deeper into stillness. Imagine the caravan bells far away, their faint chime blending into the rhythm of your heartbeat. Each sound drifts further softer until all that remains is calm. The desert spirits, once fierce and restless, now watch over you in peace, their presence no longer threatening but protective, like guardians of sleep. You are safe here, wrapped in the quiet memory of kings and traders, scholars and storytellers. The weight of empire, its triumphs and its declines, rests behind you now. All that remains is a gentle whisper, a reminder that even the greatest powers fade into silence, leaving space for rest, for renewal, for dreams. So let your thoughts soften, your breath lengthen, and your body grow light. The sands are cool, the stars eternal, and the night endlessly kind. Slip deeper now into the calm of history's embrace, into the warmth of your own dreams.